Starting again. Hello, we are Group 5, and we are here to tell you about the case study on Quicktronics. Our group is Crystal, Jonelle, Faye, Brian, and Alexander. So first, start with an introduction of the case. Case is about Quicktronics. They are a smartphone assembly in Batam, Indonesia. They assemble phones and they store them in the warehouse once they're done and then ship them in response to customer orders. The current Quicktronics planning of production has a demand forecast for about 12 months that was created with help from customers, as seen below. They have a steady workforce of 667 teams of 10 workers, making a total workforce of 6,670. They build inventory in the first half of the year for the second half, and this makes workforce management very easy since there's no change in the workforce. However, it does lead up to large buildups of inventory, and also they ended the past December before this forecast with 1 million phones in inventory. They attempted to meet the forecasted demand at the lowest cost, and make sure the inventory and labor in the coming December is equal to the previous December. Now the question is, could hiring and firing as needed reduce inventory, make this more cost effective? So now let's also go over some of the objective costs and capacities. There are 10 workers per team. The production capacity is equal to 125 phones per hour per team. This comes to 12.5 phones produced per worker per hour. The regular time wages are 4,000 rupiah per hour per worker. The overtime wages are 6,000 rupiah per hour per worker. And the overtime capacity is 10 hours per month per worker. The layoff cost is 800,000 rupiah per worker. The hiring cost is 400,000 rupiah per worker. The holding cost is 50,000 rupiah per phone per month. The stockout cost is 100,000 rupiah per phone. And it is stipulated that there is no stockouts in December, so they can start the new year off without having to fulfill any stockout orders. And the material cost is 500,000 rupiah per phone.
Current production plan in play at the moment revolves particularly around the maintenance of keeping 6,670 workers employed throughout the year, as well as maintaining a 1 million inventory at the beginning and at the end of each production year. During the middle, it will fluctuate in accordance to the demand and production, which can be shown in the graph in the slide. And what we notice is that because of these certain constraints of workforce constraints, there is no costs for hiring or laying off, as well as no overtime costs. But what we do notice is that there's a large amount of inventory that occurs throughout the middle of the year, partly in result of the demand as it steadily grows across as the year progresses. Fortunately, though, because of this, it's able to naturally bring inventory down to about 1 million units by the time December arrives. One of the biggest costs in this current plan is inventory itself, which summed with the cost of workforce and material costs, total cost of this current plan is about 81 trillion 513 billion 225,600,000 rupiah. So that's a pretty sizable cost for this company. Overall, there is a more efficient methods of doing it. In the next slide, please. In this current plan, in Plan 2, it mainly focuses on the flexibility of being able to employ and discharge employees, which will greatly affect productivity, inventory, and overtime costs, as now we're able to optimize inventory to zero throughout the middle of the production year, as well as incur more, well, firstly, drop employees in accordance to demand, and steadily increase the amount of employees as demand increases. So with this, we're able to lower the cost of inventory overall. Also, from the beginning, lower the cost of workforce at the beginning of the year, and then also at the end, also meet the inventory requirements of 1 million units. So, and in this method, we see a difference of about 7 trillion rupiah, roughly estimated. So the savings are quite substantial from this plan and the next. Next slide, please.
So for the first alternative option, we come up with the subcontracting together with having the flexibility of hiring and firing team as desired. First of all, we set the value of subcontracting cost per unit higher than the original material cost per unit. Therefore, we set the range of subcontracting cost per unit starting from 500 which in increment of 10,000 rupiah. Once we set up everything and run the solver, it falls within the range of 510,000 rupiah to 570,000 rupiah. When subcontracting cost per unit greater than 570,000 rupiah, for example, from 580,000 to 600,000 rupiah, the total costs are actually still considered lower as compared to the current plan. However, the amount of subcontracting cost is 0 rupiah, indicating zero subcontract production. Next slide, please. So here's an example. When subcontracting cost per unit is 510,000 rupiah, the total cost is lower than the total cost of current plan. And subcontract production took place in period 11, which is November, and period 12, December. When subcontracting cost per unit equals to 600,000 rupiah, the total cost is still considered lower than the original total cost of current plan. However, there's no subcontract production in this model.
So the second plan is the material discount and workforce optimization. This alternative, it would require a few factors to be met. One, it would require the removal of the workforce constraint to the realization of the accelerated forecast demand, beginning from the third quarter and ending in the fourth. And lastly, persuasiveness, business savvy to strike a discounted deal during the high demand seasons. So with regards to the discount deal, a conservative contract would include a 1% discount on the material costs during all of the third quarter, along with a quarter percent increase discount for all of Q4. So establishing this and recalculating the production schedule would show that the company would be required to lay off 65% of its workforce the beginning of the year. However, the company does hire all of them back gradually throughout the year. So yes, they do take the initial hit of layoff costs, which equates to about 5.2 billion rupees, and the gradual hiring and regular employee costs through the year, which is close to 53.8 billion rupees. So about 2.56 billion rupees more than what they currently incur. But the caveat is that they only incurred a fraction of a holding cost, which is around 50 billion rupees, compared to the 7.47 or 7.46 trillion holding costs that they currently incur during their production schedule. So it's quite significant. Now, along with this alternative, assuming they did make a deal with their material suppliers, they are also able to cut materials costs by nearly half a trillion rupees with a discounted contract that they established between Q3 and Q4. Now, if you step back and look at the total cost of their current production schedule, they roughly incur a total cost of 87.567 trillion rupees compared to our workforce optimization with the discount alternative, which would incur a total cost of 79.543 trillion rupees. So it would essentially save them 8 trillion rupees, which is roughly about 9.1% of their current annual costs.
When looking back, we can see the flexibility to employ and lay off the workforce is concluded to be a better strategy for reducing costs for Quicktronics. In this small graph here, we can see when they maintain their current workforce, their total cost was at 87.567 trillion, whereas when they had the flexibility of hiring and firing, their total cost was 80.402 trillion. The flexibility of hiring and firing reduced the total cost to 7.164 trillion. When implementing the strategy of employing and firing workers based on the demand forecast, we can see in the other previous slides that hiring and firing costs are incurred, but the holding costs incurred are dramatically decreasing. Stockpile of inventory month to month, or the holding mass stat, there won't be as big of a non-holding mass stockpile. Overall, the flexibility of hiring and firing provides opportunity and reduced costs when combined with other strategic alternatives.
Right. So in terms of our recommendation, we would highly suggest the Quicktronic to consider our second alternative. Utilizing this alternative would significantly lower their overall total cost. Regardless, if the discount contract with the suppliers were not established, utilizing this method would still be advantageous. Now, comparing this alternative with the discount contract to our first alternative with the subcontract or the optimization of the subcontracting overtime resources, where subcontract costs is around 510,000 per unit, Quicktronic would still have an annual savings of 60,766 billion rupees. So it also allows them to deal with the demand forecast errors, as their monthly production would maximize to 20 million compared to 13.34 million on any given month. And that should conclude our presentation. Thank you.